the offensive play, the first few possessions of the game? What did you see out there? What went right, what went wrong?
Well, what'd you think? I mean, it's kind of a loaded question, isn't it? I mean, if it stinks, it stinks. Smells bad for everybody. Smell bad for you? Yeah. I mean, what do you want me to do, make excuses for him?
And let me ask the obvious question. Last week you said, obviously, Ennis is still the starter. Is he still the starter?
Yeah, yes. As I said, we have two really good quarterbacks.
We had a chance to win. We didn't get it done. We'll go back to work tomorrow, and we'll go to fixing it. And that's what we're going to do. A lot of football season left. Whole heck of a lot of football season left. And I tell you what, I saw a bunch of fighters in that locker room. A bunch of friggin' fighters on the sideline. And that's a football team that's going to continue to improve and get better. They're going to fight to improve and get better. I don't know how many games we're going to win, but I know we're going to fight.
Quarterbacks are like dogs. I mean, if you throw them a treat, then they respond. You know, they get smiles on their face, their tails wag, and then pretty soon they'll be a little more affectionate towards you as far as throwing the ball your direction. You see, and
we played some pretty good teams and beat some pretty good teams. You know, so we're headed that direction. We got a long way to go, but tonight sure was nice.
Welcome in to the latest episode of that SEC podcast. I'm your host, Michael Breton. I go by SEC Mike on Twitter, and I'm flying solo for this episode, but don't worry. Reached out to my buddy Jake Wimberly, host of the Afternoon Drive, ESPN Mississippi 105.9 out of Jackson. He's going to join the show in just a minute. I think you guys will really enjoy the conversation we had, talking a lot of what's going on in the state of Mississippi, as well as around the SEC after last week's action and heading into this week. So got a lot to talk about on this show, so let's get right into it. And, not a ton of news, to be honest with you, in the SEC here on Wednesday, but we did have some news from the NCAA that's going to affect every single SEC team. So I thought we'd start with that. The NCAA has officially announced that they have passed the rule that has been rumored for several weeks, and that is to allow teams to sign up to 7 extra players. So let me break all this down for you because it's a little confusing. So this is a one-time deal, football scholarship limits. If you're not familiar, most of you I assume are though, programs are allowed to sign 25 scholarship players a given year. And typically how that you used to do that would be high school players and junior college players, and that was it. And now, of course, we've got transfers. Transfers are running rampant in the sport. So now there have been coaches that instead of signing 25 high school or junior college prospects, they've been saving spots, so to speak, because you just never know who's going to pop up in the portal. I know Alabama did this last year. They held a spot or two, and that's how they got Jamison Williams and Henry To'oTo'o, so they had spots for those guys. So that's just one example, but this is really becoming an issue, and that compounded by the fact you got programs like Tennessee, especially. That's the one that comes to mind, and South Carolina is another good example. New head coaches coming in, a lot of transfers out. You got to make sure that everybody is on an even playing field as possible. You want to have everybody at an 85 scholarship limit. So these additional scholarships, again, it's a total of 7 you can add with this new rule. So theoretically, teams can sign 32 players in a given year. But here's the catch. You cannot go out and sign 32 high school prospects. That's not how it's going to work. It's going to work like this. 25, as always, high school, junior college prospects signed during the early signing period and the traditional National Signing Day in February. That, they're going to keep it exactly the same. Now, here's the deal. After, and this is key, after the early signing period, which is in mid-December, if a player transfers out of your program, you can essentially replace him with a transfer, and it won't cost you an extra scholarship. So you're using one of your 7 to replace a transfer with another transfer, if that makes sense. So the 7 extra they're giving you, they all have to be transfers. And why that is important, so in reality, when this passed, it's interesting. I don't really know why they've done it this way, but for example, Tennessee, that's the one everyone thinks of because they were just ravaged by the transfer portal. Josh Heupel does not currently have 7 extra guys that he can add via the transfer portal to go along with 25 high school, junior college signees. And here's the reason why. They're only allowing you to do this season, and the guys have to transfer out after the upcoming signing period. So I don't really understand why they've done it this way when you're trying to help a program like Tennessee, like a South Carolina. But what this is really going to do is help the next batch of coaches that come into a program and suffer all these transfers. And of course, there's going to be players that transfer out in the SEC. We all know that. I'm not being naive, but it's interesting. I kind of wish they would allow the programs that have already been hit with defections from the transfer portal an opportunity right away to make up for those. But it is what it is. And also, it should be noted that this is only a one-time deal. This is not going to be every year. At least that's what they're saying right now. They're going to consider this moving forward. Here's the exact wording from the NCAA. Council members acknowledge the solution was temporary but necessary. A more permanent solution will be considered in the coming months. So again, programs, same as always, you can sign 25 scholarship guys in the early signing period. And if you want to combine that with the National Signing Day, and then once players start transferring out at the end of the season, you can, if you lose 7 guys to the portal, you can add 7 guys, and it's not going to affect that 25 scholarship limit. So overall, this is a great thing. I just wish it, a little bit they would have it retroactive to where programs that were really hit hard, you can kind of mitigate those losses if need be, because, at the end of the day, it's a player safety issue, and hell, all these first-year coaches in the SEC could use all the help they can get, already being behind the 8 ball in so many other aspects. So, nice move by the NCAA. Just wish I don't honestly see why you're not allowed to sign 32 high school prospects. I guess this is just more of strictly a transfer portal issue, and they're worried about prospects getting stuck in the portal and things like that, and with the people jumping in and out. But I don't know if it's going to be as big of an issue moving forward, because last time we checked, I think there's about 2,000 prospects in the portal that don't have anywhere to go. So what is 7 more spots going to help you? I would have liked to seen this just be 32 across the board, no restrictions, 32 high school prospects if you wanted to. But, I don't know. We'll see how this goes. At the end of the day, I think this is a good thing, but I'm just not 100% sure on why they placed all these restrictions on it. But all right, hey, some quick hitters before we get to our interview with Jake Wimberly. Wanted to note here, big news, at least uniforms. I'm not a huge uniform guy, to be honest with you, but I notice so many are. So we'll get with this one right off the bat here. But Tennessee unveiled they're going to wear black uniforms this Saturday against South Carolina for the noon game. And interesting, a lot of fans upset that they're not holding these out for Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss. We got a night game on Rocky Top here in the coming weeks. So interesting decision here. You're breaking them out for a noon game against South Carolina. And, we'll flash here on the YouTube. We'll show you the uniform for you to check out. Interestingly, they got the white helmet to go along with the black uniform. But as Jason Swain, friend of the show, host of the Swain event there in Knoxville, breaks it down, they were trying to get black helmets, but unable to get them due to all the COVID and everything that goes into that. I guess there were issues just getting everything in line to make the helmets in time for the season. So that explains that. But aside from that, I think it looks pretty great. And like I said, I'm not a huge uniform guy. I don't think it has anything to do with who wins the game, obviously, or how these players feel. I guess it could give them some extra energy. But, going back to what I said, I've seen so many Tennessee fans upset. They wanted this to be the night game attire. It made sense. Lane Kiffin was the coach last time Tennessee wore black jerseys, the only time Tennessee wore black jerseys. So in some regard, it makes sense. But for me, a couple of things. Lane Kiffin would have made this all about himself if they wore him for the Ole Miss game. He would have had some kind of wisecrack about, every time they wore the black, he's in Neyland Stadium, something. He would have trolled him in some way, and I don't think you want that. And also, no disrespect to the Gamecocks, but Tennessee, if you're pulling out something like this, you got to win the ball game. And it's much more likely, I'm not saying it's a lock or anything, but it's much more likely, I think even South Carolina fans would admit, that Tennessee could beat South Carolina than Tennessee beating Ole Miss. And that's not to say the Vols can't beat Ole Miss, but I just think, you're a 10.5-point favorite against South Carolina. We'll see where that spread is for the Ole Miss game. I don't think it's going to be anything quite like that. So just something to consider. I think Tennessee really, they need to have this be a good weekend and, get away from the Kiffin potential troll and just go out there and you're right now you got momentum. This will give it to you. And there's no Halloween game or anything after Ole Miss. Tennessee's on the road 2 weeks in a row, so you couldn't really break this out during Halloween either. So I got no problem with it. And, I can't wait to see what Tennessee looks like on the field with these black jerseys. All right, skipping down to Baton Rouge real quick. Unfortunate news, Derek Stingley has officially had his surgery. And here's a statement from the All-American corner. I appreciate all the support from LSU and the fans. I'm doing all that I can to return to the field as soon as possible. I want to finish out the season with my teammates, and I will do everything I can to get healthy so that I will be able to play again this year. LSU has said no timetable for Derek Stingley to return, and now that we're a couple weeks into the season here, they even delayed this surgery. I mean, I'm not a doctor, so I guess he had to be evaluated and all that, but it took us a good 2 weeks to have this procedure. So the fact that it was kind of delayed, the fact that he's actually, had it, I don't know. I think we've probably seen the last we're going to see of Derek Stingley in an LSU uniform. Clearly his statement there says he's going to work to get back, but, you got to assume he's a lock to be a first-round NFL draft pick. It's hard to see him risking any of that on the field, but I hope we haven't seen the last of him. We'll see, but no idea what the timeline is for a foot surgery like this. You got to imagine it's several weeks, and here we're at the midway point of the season, so it's interesting. We'll see how that plays out. One other thing here, another injury news. Hate to share this, but Missouri cornerback, they have announced Ennis Rakestraw, one of their better defensive backs, tore his ACL in practice this week, so he's out for the season. And man, that Missouri defense, the pass defense is certainly a lot stronger than the run defense, and now you lost arguably your most talented guy back there. I know they have the two touted transfers from Tulsa back there, Evans and Green, who you could argue probably better than Rakestraw, but he's got massive potential. He's the one that the viral clip of Eli Drinkowitz going bananas when they beat Alabama for the recruitment of Ennis Rakestraw. So sucks to see him go, and that is the last thing you need in Missouri. There is your defense to get potentially even weaker following this news. All right, so that's all I got. Like I said, it's kind of a slow day in the SEC, so let's kick it over to our interview with Jake Wimberly of the Afternoon Drive. Well, we're pleased to once again be joined by my buddy Jake Wimberly. Got to give him a follow at Jake Wim. And of course, he's the host of the Afternoon Drive for ESPN 105.9 out of Jackson. And he also owns CFBHourglass.com. Jake, for joining me once again, I really do appreciate it.
Michael, always a pleasure to be with you and to be with your team. Y'all are continuing to crush it, and what a fun, interesting football season we've had so far.
Yeah, no doubt. And I really wanted to have you this week after Mississippi State's big win there at Kyle Field. Will Rogers, I think he had the best game he's ever had as a member of Mississippi State. And this comes not long after, some fans questioning whether he's even the right guy for the job. And I know your relationship goes way back with Will Rogers. What did you think of his big game? And is this just the start of more of these performances from Will Rogers?
Totally excited for Will on a personal level, because like you said, I've known the young man since he was a youngster, know his father, and great family and just great people, and glad to see the game starting to slow down for him. You can tell it's really starting to slow down. I mean, he's done a nice job at Mississippi State. A lot of people forget he's only 9-10 starts this thing. He got cast into action as a freshman last year when KJ Costello just could not get it done for Mike Leach. Youngest quarterback I believe Mike Leach has ever started. Does not like typically starting guys as freshmen or sophomore. Mm-hmm. But I thought Saturday, the game really slowed down for Will. He was able to take some shots down the field. And look, the chemistry that him and Mekhi Polk have developed at Mississippi State, Washington State transfer, and Mike Leach spoke candidly about Mekhi and the recruiting process this week in his press conference, and how, hey, look, this guy's an absolute player. He may not be the biggest or the fastest, but he's a very savvy player, knows how to run routes. That connection and chemistry between Will and Mekhi and some of the other receivers is really starting to pay dividends, and really did against Texas A&M on the road to go into a really hostile environment and grab a much-needed win for the Bulldogs.
Yeah, and what a scene that was in Kyle Field. I mean, those fans almost willed the Aggies back in that one, but of course, Mississippi State's defense came up big there to secure the win. How surprised are you to see Texas A&M sitting here at 3-2, hosting Alabama this weekend? So there's a good bet the Aggies are going to be 3-3 by Saturday night. How big of a surprise is that to you?
It's actually a pretty big surprise, considering all of the hype coming in the season, and just knowing that Texas A&M has top 5 talent in the country. And, Jimbo Fisher was extremely, I think you and I spoke of this back during the summer a couple times, extremely confident in his team, vocal in public, at public settings about his team. And, a lot of people had referenced the last time he was this confident was when he had Jameis Winston at Florida State. They went on to win the national title. So you thought, okay, this team is going to be a team that really is going to not only press Alabama, they're going to press for the national championship this year. Mm-hmm. But then, their starting quarterback goes down against Colorado, and it's like everything has really kind of gone to the wayside. They can't really move the football in the air, which, really puts the burden on Isaiah Spiller. He is not having the year that they, anticipated that he would have. So it really is interesting to see the struggles at Texas A&M. And again, like you said, it doesn't get any easier this weekend with Alabama coming in. And Alabama, I figure, will beat them as bad as they want to beat them down there this week.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of disappointment, last weekend certainly was for the Ole Miss Rebels. I was dumb enough to pick Ole Miss to go in there and beat Alabama, but what are your thoughts on what we saw last week from Ole Miss, and do you think they got exposed a little bit, or do you think they bounced back this week against Arkansas?
Interesting game this week against Arkansas. Both Ole Miss and Arkansas got knocked down on the mat and never got up, and it's going to be fun to see which one of these two teams can get up off the mat and respond the quickest. I've got to give the slight edge to Ole Miss just because they're at home. But in reference to the game at Alabama, I think what we saw was the difference, the talent differential really take place. And, Matt Corral, really good quarterback, has not performed his best football on the road in his career at Ole Miss, struggled at Memphis 2 years ago, did pick up a win at Vanderbilt in Kentucky last year, a heck of a game at Kentucky, but then lost at LSU and Arkansas. Had a pretty nice day. But I think what you saw was, and a lot of people gave Lane Kiffin, a lot of grief. And I was kind of one on the fourth down call. But after thinking about it, the second fourth down call where Alabama was up 7-0, and then they go on to make it 14-0, that was kind of the ball game at that point. But if you look at it, I think Lane knew, hey, my defense probably can't bail us out here. The only thing that can bail us out is our offense. So he went with, what they had, kind of the thing that got them there. I don't know that you would call them exposed. They're a team that could finish second, third, who knows, maybe fourth. We'll see what the pecking order, kind of falls out, like in the SEC with Auburn. Looks like they're a little better than we thought. But I think what you saw is Ole Miss still needs another year in recruiting. He's got to get a little better on the defensive side. And, as good as some of those playmakers are, there's still some improvement there to be made, in the recruiting process. And I think what you saw is just a true talent differential takeover in the ballgame in a very hostile place where Alabama rarely loses.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know you have a long history there covering that state and Dan Mullen. We all know the shorts game that he lost there against, South Alabama. Well, he wasn't wearing shorts Saturday night in Lexington, but he sure as hell coached like he was. How surprising was it to see Dan Mullen with all these, questionable tactics here on the road to Kentucky? And you could certainly say, I think Dan Mullen's a hell of a coach, but I could certainly think that, he cost his team a victory there against Kentucky.
You know, Michael, watching that whole game unfold, sitting there, and I was just thinking, man, we've seen this in the state of Mississippi before. And that's not a knock at Dan Mullen. Like you said, he's a really good coach. I mean, you know, Mississippi State really owes, you know, a lot of gratitude towards Dan Mullen. I mean, he was able to take them through the best 10-year run that they've ever had. And it was a heck of a run. Now, there was some mistakes along the way, like a lot of coaches make. But I think what we've seen out of Dan Mullen, and fair or unfair, I think we can start to say that Dan Mullen is honestly not a big moment coach. You know, we saw him with the play call against Alabama a couple weeks ago, going for it on the 2-point conversion. I think everybody in the building plus Alabama knew that he's going to run the zone read. That's the play that he loves on short yardage. He doesn't change a lot of stuff up. He has folded before in big moments. You know, I can remember when Mississippi State went over to Alabama. Back when Dak Prescott was there and they were number one in the country, there was some major Mullen moments early in that ball game that got them behind 18-0. So, you know, Mullen is a really good coach, but watching that Kentucky game, we've seen that kind of stuff before. And it's not a slight at Dan Mullen. I mean, some guys are really good hitters, but you don't want them at the plate in the biggest moments. And I am of the belief Mullen is not a big moment coach, and I think that showed up again against Kentucky on Saturday.
Now, I know you've been high on Georgia all off season, as have I. And, of course, Alabama's just the machine. They've always been there under Saban. Are you seeing any possible landmines for either program, just strictly speaking, in the SEC regular season this year?
You know, Alabama, I don't think is as dominant. I think we can all see this as they were last year. However, they're still a lot better than most everybody in the country. Right. But the thing that it concerns me if I'm an Alabama fan is there has been a propensity to be able to run the football on Alabama. And if you swing that to the Georgia side of things, you know, I was almost of the belief coming into this year that we were beyond the age of great defenses can win you championships. You know, Nick Saban kind of spoke of this in a media hit back, I think in March or April of, you know, how used to you could hold a team to 14 points. And if you scored, you know, 21, typically, if you could hold them to 14, you're going to win every time, obviously. But now defenses have changed, offenses have changed, and the defense, you know, the defensive side of the ball is different. However, Georgia is playing at such a high rate and a clip defensively, and they can run the football, I think, for the first time in a long time, maybe ever since we've seen, you know, Kirby Smart square off against Nick Saban, that Georgia probably has the advantage. Because they have the advantage at the line of scrimmage, they can block it, they can run it, they can stuff it. However, if I'm Georgia, I still feel like there may be some limitations at quarterback. How far can Stetson Bennett take you? You know, I think it was the Alabama game last year. He kind of imploded in the second half. You know, how elite can he be? But if Georgia can continue to run the ball and they get a healthy JT Daniels who can come back and be, you know, a serviceable quarterback along with Bennett, they kind of tag team this thing. The way they run the ball and play defense, they may not have to. We may see Georgia win the national championship without elite quarterback play, something that I kind of thought we were out of the era of, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. So, hey, big game here in Lexington. We talked a little Kentucky, but LSU traveling to Kentucky, another night game for the Wildcats. And if I'm not mistaken, Ed Orgeron has only lost consecutive games once in his career as LSU's head coach, that is. How bad does Coach O need this one? And do you think, man, I hate putting coaches on the hot seat and saying they have to win to get fired, but just looking at the schedule, I mean, this seems like a must-win for Coach O and his LSU program. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's an absolute must-win for Ed Orgeron. I mean, look, there's three knockouts that we're looking at Saturday night. We're looking at Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder, if you're a boxing fan, who's going to get knocked out possibly. And then Ed Orgeron, can he get knocked out by Stoops in Kentucky? Because, Michael, if he loses on the road at Lexington, this is it. Because I think it is. I mean, all of the stuff going on off the field, Ed Orgeron has kind of lost his luster with the media, the stick of Go Tigers, and all that was cute and fun when they were winning a national title. I think people have grown tired of that. Just some of the hiring snafus he's had, some of the issues with talent not panning out. It's still a good football team, but it's not LSU. It's not what LSU fans want. It's not what that administration wants. And this is going to be a hornet's nest that he's going into. I mean, LSU talent-wise goes in with better talent. Now, obviously, they've got Stingley Jr. and some others that are on the shelf for this ball game, but he's got to win this game. I don't see how he makes it if he goes on the road and loses to Kentucky. Because like you said, if you look down the schedule, it doesn't get any easier for LSU this season.
Mm-hmm. All right, last thing for you, Jake. This may be the toughest week, I think, in the SEC to pick games against the spread. Maybe that's just because the odds makers get better as more information comes along. But is there one game in particular that you over at CFB Hourglass maybe favor over any other game against the spread this weekend in the SEC?
Wow, that's a great question. And I'll be putting out, shameless plug, WIMS winners, where we are gradually getting more and more above the clip. We're about 9 games over 500 right now. That's all college and NFL games against the spread and win and point totals plus the NFL. Now, NFL has been just a wonky league to pick this year, but college, it's getting a little better. But like you said, Vegas, they will tighten this thing up as they go along because they have more information. Crazy play here. I'm not necessarily looking at a line, maybe Georgia to go over and cover at Auburn this weekend, but I oddly do like the point total under Arkansas and Ole Miss. They went under last year. I picked the under in the Alabama and Ole Miss game. Never thought that they would hit that clip this year. So I'm going to go, if I went stone cold lock, my Saturday down south stone cold lock, it's going to be the win total, Ole Miss, Arkansas, take the under. And if I'm going to lean, it's soft lean a point coverage, still go Georgia against Auburn. Look, Bo Nix made some heck of a plays last week. He's not going to be able to pull a Houdini out of a hat against the Bulldogs this weekend.
All right, he's Jake Wimberly. Once again, you got to give him a follow at Jake Wim, host of the Afternoon Drive on ESPN 105.9 out of Jackson, and the website cfbhourglass.com. Jake, thank you so much for joining me once again.
Michael, always appreciate it. Have a great week.
All right, just want to say thanks to Jake for hopping on the line. Hope you guys appreciated that. He does a hell of a job there for the ESPN affiliate out of Jackson, Mississippi, and he does a great job with the CFBhourglass.com. If you're not following Jake already, I highly, highly recommend it. That's all he does is college football, and he does some trolling too, so I do appreciate Jake hopping on the line. And hey, that's going to do it. A little bit of a shorter one here, but like I said, not a ton going on. Didn't want to leave you guys hanging without a pod for your Thursday commute. So we'll be back on Friday with Cousin Shane making our predictions for the upcoming weekend in the SEC. And after last week was a dud, hey, this weekend's got to be a lot better. Who knows? We got some of the top teams in the country traveling this weekend into some hostile environments. Not saying we're going to get an upset, but that's the first step to getting these huge upsets in college football. And I know Shane's certainly hoping there ain't no upset on Rocky Top. So stick with us. We'll be back on Friday to make our picks. Cannot wait for that. But that's going to do it for this episode. Catch you on the next one.